once James and the other producer, Susan Brecker, who's the widow of Michael Brecker, decided to make the film. So why don't we start out with you giving us a little bit of background and tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, the film came about with, there was an article written about me and my donor in the New York Times. And Susan read the article and she immediately emailed me off that article and said, that's the story I wanted for Michael. And that's how the whole relationship started. I immediately emailed her back and we started a friendship, and we both had the same frustration. And the frustration was 90% of the people that we talked to out there didn't know what it took to be a bone marrow donor, how easy it was to get onto the registry, how easy it was to donate now. And after months and months of talking about our frustrations, we said it's now time to do something about this. And we can go out there and talk to as many people as possible, but how do we reach the masses? How do we tell Michael's story, which was number one, I said Michael's story needs to be told. And number two, how do we make a difference with that story being told? And that's really how it all came about, and then an introduction to Noah to make it into a beautiful film. So.
And Noah had actually been friends with Susan Brecker for a number of years. He's a musician as well as being a filmmaker, and had a lot of personal interest in making the film as well. So why don't you give us some insight into that?
I had been a friend of the Breckers for years before this film ever came about. I watched Michael get diagnosed and then record Pilgrimage and then pass away. And before that, I had been helping Michael in his studio when he was leading up to recording Pilgrimage. He couldn't bend over and he couldn't set up his equipment, so I would go over and I would help him plug in, his equipment and be there for whatever he needed. So I had this very close relationship with him for a period of time as he was leading up to recording his album. And then saw him record Pilgrimage, and that moment of him recording that album in the condition he was in, as you saw, was one of the most incredible things I've ever witnessed, and continues to be a source of inspiration for me personally. So when Susan and James came to me with the idea to make a film about Michael, as well as James and Sean's stories, it was a clear decision for me. I wanted to do it.
I'd also like to add another note that Sean, the other gentleman in the film, is recovered. He is now in training for the 2014 Olympics for the skeleton. So he's not only a Yale Law School graduate, but he looks nothing today like he does in the film. He's all filled out and muscular and looks very, very healthy and is doing quite well. So I figured everyone would probably appreciate the update.
Well, I think that brings up a question, though, because I had the question I watched the film is, what's the difference between a cord blood and a unrelated match or a stem cell donation? And cord blood donation, he had no other choice. It was like, you're either going to die or we're going to try this cord blood transplant, which is usually reserved for children. And they said, but we really don't have a choice, so we're going to do what's a more riskier procedure. And it's more riskier in the sense that there's no long-term survival rates. There's less, you don't bounce back as quickly, so there's more risk of infection. And Sean had a lot of those. But that was really his only option because he could not find a donor. And as you see in the film, there's only an 18% chance of finding a donor if you're an African American. So, but we are happy to say Sean is doing well.
That's great.